right. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are all doing well. It has been a lovely day outside. I hope you have been enjoying it so far. If you're watching this later and you missed it because you're outside, good for you. Soak up the sun because why not? It's a good day. So today just had a quick devotional. Wanted to continue on as we've been going through our small study through the book of Nehemiah. Again, a shorter one today. One that I've kind of been working on this week and thinking about, praying about, looking forward to sharing that with you. But also too, just want to let you guys know again too, we miss seeing you guys. We're praying for you guys. We love you guys. If you need anything, please feel free to give us a call. We'll do whatever we can to help you out. Now, jumping into things, the past couple times going through, as I've been coming in and sharing with you guys, we've been talking about rebuilding. First, we talked about some things that we can do to rebuild, that we can be working on. Then we talked about dealing with opposition to rebuilding. And today, I wanted to talk about internal barriers to rebuilding. Now, this is actually a shorter one. Normally, I've always talked about, I got my 3 points and everything. We really have 2 points, and kind of each of them is going to be the opposite of the other. So we'll kind of get to that. But we're going to jump right into Nehemiah chapter 5, the first couple verses. Now, if you look at Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 1, it says, "Now there arose a great outcry of the people and of their wives against their Jewish brothers." Now, it starts out right there, beginning of the chapter. And it says, "For there were those who said, 'With our sons and daughters we are many, so let us get grain that we may eat and keep alive.' There were also those who said, 'We are mortgaging our fields, our vineyards, and our houses to get grain because of the famine.' And there were those who said, 'We have borrowed money for the king's tax on our fields and our vineyards. Now our flesh is as the flesh of our brothers, our children are as their children, yet we are forcing our sons and our daughters to be slaves, and some of our daughters have already been enslaved. But it is not in our power to help it, for other men have our fields and our vineyards." And during the book of Nehemiah, as we've already seen as we've been kind of working through things, the restoration of Jerusalem has not always been this epic action story. This is not necessarily what you're going to go through and try and set to Hollywood as that blockbuster film. It's got these ups and downs. We see people coming at them and giving them a hard time as they try and rebuild. There's that work. Well, we come to this issue. And it leads off with a group of Jews basically accusing others of oppressing them and kind of holding them down more or less. Now, they got past the external oppression, the external problems, the opposition that they dealt with. Now all of a sudden it's coming internally. Now, after last week, as I was going through and studying it, and seeing the Jews go through and their work together, and they're armed, they're stopping the opposition, and I was like, yeah, you guys are awesome, let's do this, and it's exciting. Well, then all of a sudden it kind of falls flat when you get to this point, and then the internal differences comes about, because obviously we talked about there's going to be external problems now for us, people who will oppose the idea of us reopening, of rebuilding. Well, there's going to be problems that happen internally and some problems that we're seeing internally now. Now, verse 6 of Nehemiah chapter 5, verse 6 says, "I was very angry when I heard their outcry and these words." Now, the conflict here is that the poor are being pushed down by the nobles and the officials. And part of that anger, of course, may have been influenced by the fact that their exile had been partially due to the fact of the oppression of the weak by the strong. That had been part of the reasons for God's anger at them. So he may be looking at that, and that could have fueled some of his anger. Is like, wait a minute, we already made this mistake, guys. What are you doing? And struggling with that and figuring out, okay, how are we going to handle this? And we go through, and now there's two things as we deal with internal barriers to rebuilding. Now I'm going to address two things that we can do to help work on those things. The first thing is do no harm to one another. Now I'm not just saying, hey, don't go punch your neighbor or something like that. Don't, if you happen to live next to somebody else in the church, if you get mad at them, don't go punching them. Well, I'm obviously saying don't do that. Please don't do that. But I'm also saying, if we talk about it, let's talk about the elephant in the room right now that we are dealing with. Everybody has a different opinion about reopening the state, about reopening church, if we're really realistic about it. I go on and there are so many articles of people in the faith all across the board. It's not even like certain age groups have certain ideas or anything like that. It's everybody has a different opinion. And people argue about those opinions. That's one of the biggest things, that's one of the things that happens with opinions is so many times we argue about them. And a lot of times arguments get nasty. Well, let's focus on this particular thing now. Even those of you that are watching right now, you may have different ideas about, oh yeah, should we start going back to church or should the state reopen? Tons of you, will have, potentially you may all have a different opinion. Well, as you have those different opinions, do no harm. Don't be hurtful. If you disagree with someone else in the church about this, don't say, well, you're stupid because you think that. Don't fight with each other because you have a differing opinion on this. And I'll be honest, as I was going through and working through this devotional, the thought of bringing this up and kind of addressing it was mildly kind of like, oh man. But I realized more and more as I thought this week and prayed about it, that it's something that we need to all think about. As brothers and sisters in Christ, we need to be loving of one another, even if we may not necessarily agree on something like this. So today, whatever said beforehand, okay, that has happened. But going forward, if you disagree with someone, even this particular issue or another one, be loving about how you disagree. Don't harm one another in your disagreement. And we see too, so that's one of the things we need to think about is remember internally as we move towards rebuilding. And now the next part, we kind of go through the idea overarching was the internal barriers. Well, that's one of the biggest things, but there's other different issues, and I could go through this long list, and this could be more like a sermon of barriers that we could deal with, but kind of overall, treat each other with love. Do not harm one another. Now, and here's the thing too, when we eventually get back, there's going to be this thing, everybody talks about the honeymoon phase, of a relationship where everything's all really nice and happy and, you kind of overlook each other's flaws, but then all of a sudden it dawns on you that maybe so-and-so forgets to, do something. And, there's going to probably be a honeymoon phase as we come back to church where we're all going to be like, oh, I haven't seen you. Oh my goodness, it's so awesome. I'm so happy to see you. And you're just all happy about that. But eventually the honeymoon phase wears off. And eventually you'll start to realize, oh man, so-and-so does this, or and I'm not going to pick on any particular people. Maybe it's somebody that you're like, oh man, I can't believe that you root for the Red Sox or something like that. I'm not particularly saying anybody, but just say, but all of a sudden, maybe these differences that you have that you don't necessarily like in somebody else start to resurface. Again, it comes back, do no harm, just because, again, you're like, I dislike that, okay. Maybe some of you dislike my haircut. That's okay. You don't need to tell me. But be loving to one another as the honeymoon phase wears off as we go back and we can continue. So that's the first thing as we dealing with the internal problems is do no harm to one another. Be loving to one another. The second thing is, I think many of you have already been enacting, but we can continue to do that, and I think even build on that, is be generous to one another. And we look at Nehemiah. We jump forward to verses 14 through 19. And I won't read the whole passage, but going through, it's talking about, verse 14 says, moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of Artaxerxes the king, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the food allowance of the governor. Now I go through and he explains some of the issues of what the former governors has done, but then he goes through Verse 16 says, I also persevered in the work on this wall, and we acquired no land, and all my servants were gathered there for work. And he continues to build on the fact that Nehemiah didn't necessarily separate himself as the governor. And this is one of those things that we see he's laboring among them. And this is the kind of the first indication that Nehemiah ended up with an official title. But he didn't allow that official title to kind of put himself in a glass tower and be like, okay, you guys work on things and I'll watch you. But no, he was down in the dirt. He was jumping in. And when I talk about being generous to one another, remembering that we are all a part of the body. And so as a team, we work together. As a team, we rebuild each other. If someone that you know in the church is having an issue, maybe somebody needs food or something, and you have some extra groceries, maybe give them some of those groceries and share that with them. Go through it. This rebuilding process, as we look toward, as things reopen, as we look at reopening the church soon, hopefully, we'll see, is going to not be an easy process. And people will come through this with some difficulties potentially. So we should look at that and as our brothers and sisters in Christ, helping them, being generous with not just belongings or finances potentially, but our time. Maybe go help somebody out with something that they need help. Or if, maybe you happen to be, oh, hey, I see this person has this issue. I can help them. Or maybe you look at like, oh, I can't help them. Well, you can call us here at the office. You can say, hey, so-and-so needs some help. Do you think we could help them? So we can jump in and do that. So that's what we look at those internal differences is first of encountering and don't hurt each other when there are those internal differences and dealing with that. But on the same thing, as we continue, even with those internal differences, be generous to one another and help one another. And as we think about it, as we talk about being generous and banding together, kind of a quick analogy, a little story. So lately, I've been going through and I've been getting out and doing a lot of hiking. I need the fresh air. I need for some sanity, and I've really been enjoying it. Well, Natalie has wanted to go along with me. So last week, I took Natalie along with me on a hike, wore her out and everything, but we were going through, finishing up our hike, and there's this massive log across this little gully. It's not like a ravine or anything before you start to, oh man, what did Dan do? It's a gully, so there was probably a good 5-foot difference between the log and the ground. And I was like, hey, Natalie, do you think you can do it? She's like, yeah. And then she starts to go across it. Then she freaks out. As soon as the ground drops away, more than a foot away from the log, she starts to freak out. And it's like, no. And I had my hand on her. I'm holding her. I was like, you can do it. I'm right here. And I helped her go through it and walk across. And then, of course, she gets done. She's all excited. Now, I'm not sharing that just as an analogy or like, oh, man, I have to tell you a cute story. It is a cute story, though. But realization is that we have brothers and sisters that are kind of crossing that log during the quarantine. And we have the opportunity to reach out and put our hand up and hold them and help them as they walk across. And we should definitely be doing so. Now, that's all I have for today, but I just want to, again, offer to help one another. Again, to please, as I talk about do no harm, as you're on Facebook, as you're on social media, if you see someone that you don't necessarily disagree with, I was talking about the COVID-19 opinion, definitely, but just in general. If someone was posting something on Facebook and you're like, oh, I really want to post something, don't hit the enter button and say, okay, is this going to be harmful to say that? Pull back from that. Be loving. I love you guys. Thinking about you guys. I cannot wait to see you guys again. Now it's on.
Okay, apparently everything I just said before was not heard by anybody. My apologies. I just wanted to reiterate and say thanks to Dan for stepping in and helping out and doing this study through, kind of looking through the book of Nehemiah. I've heard really good feedback from a lot of you about how well he's doing, and I hope you'll reach out to him and encourage him if you've been blessed by his lessons. He's definitely I think just in the short time he's been working here, he's done a great job in continuing to build his skill set, and I'm really glad he's had this opportunity to share things with you as well. A couple of announcements, and then I'm going to be out of here. First announcement is just want to thank you again for the response to the Red Cross blood drive. We heard ahead of time that about 46 people were pre-registered to come on Tuesday, which is the most we've ever seen in the time that we've been hosting blood drives here at First Baptist. And we know that they kept a busy schedule all day, and they were here pretty much until 3, 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And we're just grateful to be able to have an impact in our community, in our society, in some small way. We know there's more that we would like to do. There's more that we're going to do in the future, but this is one very practical way we can meet a need in the community, and we want to continue that and be a good partner with our community as we go forward. One last thing is our next thing for on the online thing is regular Sunday morning worship at this point, 9:30. I'm going to be right back here with our continuation of our new ABF study. It's called it's called How the Story Ends, and we're taking a look at the end times. But in order to get an understanding of the end times, we need to sort of go back to the beginning of the story and understand where the story is brought to so that the ending makes sense. And so that's what we're going to be doing. If you missed last week, don't worry. I'll get you caught up to speed so you can jump in and continue on with us. Really hope you'll join us at 9:30 for ABF. Again, you'll have the option to do Zoom or just the live feed on Sunday morning for ABF. Then we go at 10:45 to our Sunday morning worship service, and we'll be doing our regular thing. I'll be continuing our series from Titus and talking through the diagnosis of the problem. So we have spiritual health, and we need the right personal spiritual trainer to guide us on the road to spiritual health. This Sunday, we're going to take a look at our spiritual trainer, Paul, his diagnosis of the problem there on the island of Crete with his friend Titus. And I think there's a lot we can also learn from that and apply to our own lives. So I hope you'll come back Sunday at 10:45 for our worship service. Just want you to know, we're continuing to talk and try to make plans, gather more information, talk to local officials, talk to other churches about a reopening plan. We don't have anything settled and established 100% in place yet, but we're working on it, talking to the leadership team, talking to a lot of people. As soon as we have any information about what we would like to do or when we would like to do it, we will make sure we communicate that to all of you ahead of time and give you our rationale, give you a step-by-step process so that you understand everything. We don't want anybody to be caught off guard, and we don't want anybody to think that we're not doing anything. We are. We're working on it, and we would appreciate, and this is the last thing I want to say to you, we need your prayers. This is not an easy process. I was talking to a couple people. I think I was talking to my wife about it first, and then I mentioned it to a few other people. This whole process has felt like putting together a Rubik's Cube. I don't know if you've ever tried to do that, where you have one that's all messed up, and it's got all the letters, not the letters, all the colors all mixed up, the blocks on the little square. And the more you turn it to fix one problem, you create another problem. That's what it seems like every time we try to fix something, we create some other issue we got to resolve. But that being said, we're going to move ahead with it, and the Lord is going to help us, and He's going to give us the wisdom we need and the courage we need to do the right thing at the right time. So please be in prayer for us that we would do the right thing, that we would seek the right wisdom, and when the time comes to do what we think we need to do, that we'll just do it with confidence and do it because we want to honor the Lord. We love you. Thank you so much for following these videos, for staying in touch with us. Some of you are kind and send notes to encourage us here in the office. We love that. We appreciate that. Thank you so much. You guys are a big part of why we do what we do. We do it for the Lord primarily, obviously, but we do it for all of you. And I'm so grateful for the impact you're still having in our lives while we're waiting for all this stuff to come back. May the Lord bless you. Hang in there. We'll see you Sunday morning at 9:30. Lord bless you.